So another EUC off the record, and this time really cool. I have a long time old friend of mine who we've worked together at a couple of places. We've done everything from being low level nobodies to, well, damn, Shawn was the CTO of EUC at VMware. Now he's the CTO at Citrix, which is freaking amazing. And before we started, just to note, we happen to be recording this on the Friday of the CrowdStrike meltdown across the world. Lots of unknowns about that right now, right? How things are shipped out, how different deployments handled it differently and all that. But uh, we were just talking a little bit that there's so much unknowns, but a lot of this is about how internal security teams and IT teams are just, they're every security fix, just push it, just go, just go. They're not putting it in their QA process, or if they are, they're doing minuscule looks at it, stuff like that. And I mean, that's what scares me the most, Shawn.
Yeah, so Ron, thanks for having me, and it's good to reconnect with you. As you mentioned, we've worked at a number of different places, sometimes different times. I mean, you were at Citrix in the past. I'm at
Yeah.
Citrix now, but we didn't overlap there. But we worked together at VMware for a number of years, and
Yeah,
if we
yeah.
go way back in timeline, we worked at the same system integrator in the God, that was probably late '90s, early 2000s, something
That's
like that.
exactly what
So
it was. And I
you've
tell people, I'm like, you don't understand. Shawn and I were we were called network engineers running around doing Citrix and,
yeah,
everything else like 20 something years ago. And
yeah.
someone goes, oh, what consulting company did you work for? Like we were at, Deloitte or something. I'm like, dude, we worked out of the back of an industrial park in this little
But
20 person
ironically,
shop.
that company was a Citrix Platinum reseller back at that time. They don't exist anymore today. The two founders were always at each other's throats, and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
company doesn't exist anymore. But I bet you could look at a lot of consulting companies and partners from 20 years ago. Most of them don't exist today because they just never kept with the times or grew
They
or
never,
you know
yeah, that's the whole thing. They never grew. They never, I still see some of the guys from the old days, the old E360 guys and, Gotham,
yeah.
who's been, you run into those, but you're right. Through consolidation and non-growth, people, they just disappear, those little companies.
Yeah.
But, with all that's going on, what I was, when I reached out a couple of weeks ago, what I really wanted to do is say, hey, all right, get into Citrix. I knew you were going, once you announced you were going there, I'm
Yeah.
like, I knew you were going to be packed the first few weeks. But what I wanted to do is say, with all that's went around and with what's going on with, VMware EUC becoming Omnissa and all, what are you kind of focusing on, right? Since you've got in
Yeah.
there and you've got the landscape now, kind of where are you looking? What's exciting you about what you're doing now?
Well, I'll answer that in a moment, but we never really tied off entirely on that security update thing.
Yeah.
And I think to give the benefit of the doubt to CrowdStrike, nobody really knows exactly what the root cause of it was. Yes, it was a
Yep.
pushed update that caused the blue screen of death. We don't yet know the circumstances of what contributed to that blue screen of death. Maybe it was an update in their code combined with a Microsoft code change. Like nobody knows the exact root cause yet. There's a lot of speculation.
Yeah.
So I think we need to, give CrowdStrike the benefit of the doubt and give them opportunity to fully explain what had happened.
Oh,
But
for
I
sure.
think what this highlights, and you and I kind of talked about this before we started recording, is it really highlights in this fast-paced world of software as a service and things being sort of auto-deployed to customers, that you really need to start balancing the security risk with the potential compliance, risk calculation for cost of doing business. Like everyone's super concerned about patching vulnerabilities as quickly as possible. And I certainly understand that if you've got a CVE with a 9.0 or above CVSS score, like it's super critical for you to update and patch that as
Mhm.
quickly as possible. But I think it also highlights the desire or the need to make sure you're balancing the potential security risk to your organization with the risk of impact if something goes wrong. Like if
Well,
you've got if you're a big enterprise and you've got 5 applications that generate 90% of your revenue for the business, you need to treat those things as mission critical, never fail, cannot go down, whatever. And if that means introducing a ring deployment mechanism that limits
mhm.
chance of risk to key line of business applications, critical infrastructure like your DNS, your Active Directory, whatever the case may be, like you've got to build a mechanism that will result in some reduction of risk from an update failure that won't take down your entire environment because you just can't afford to have that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We know how the security teams are pushing everyone. This is, at login, this is one of those things that we use as a selling point, right? It's like if you want it to be fast, then automate the test, and our until this point, until today, Change Healthcare and United Healthcare out of Chicago and that big hack, and of course that wasn't an update, that was an MFA, no MFA, all that, but
Yeah.
that used to be a thing where we would talk. We'd go, look, you have to balance the risk, not just of somebody hacking this, but the change you're making, not just shutting a system down. Right now, we're seeing systems shut down, but we have had customers that maybe we pitch to 6 months later, they come back and they go, yeah, we rolled out the change to this, and Epic Hyperspace on our Citrix servers would no longer, the calendar functions stopped working. We couldn't schedule appointments. We couldn't. And you go like, okay, you didn't test that. That's like your primary, or we rolled it out, nothing's broken, but my logins went from 7 seconds to 30. My app launch went from 30 seconds to 90.
Yeah.
And
I think the tough thing in the testing world is if you think about the definition of what user acceptance testing means, it really means testing it in the context of a user. And I think so many times in IT, we focus on what can be done from an automated remediation point of view. And there's a lot of different tools. I mean, Login is certainly one of them. There's a lot of different tools in that automated testing space that will help you catch a lot of the low-hanging fruit that would otherwise blow up in the environment. That's a quick, easy certification. Like, we know this has failed from our automated testing, reject it and go back and figure out what went wrong.
That's right.
But even when you have those automations, organizations still need to have a human test process with a person to be able to prove that the business logic hasn't failed, that a particular path through the application as part of one of your workflows hasn't blown up.
Which has been the hole in change control since we were babies in IT. I mean, I tell that I teach the sales guys sometime when I first got here. I said, you want to explain how we get into change control? And they go, yeah. And this is for more of a VDI audience, but I go, just tell them this. Hey, you've patched on a Saturday, you approved the change control, you sent out the notice to your app owners for their testing. And the only time they contact you if something goes wrong, but they never test on Sunday afternoon, you get an email going, it's okay. And then Monday morning, Citrix is down, but it's really the app is broke. And we say that as an anecdote because every Citrix admin in the world has had that happen. Yet it always comes back to that human, right? Make your change control and make the processes for testing as automated and as non-human as possible. But you're right. There's a reason at the end, someone looks at the results, someone clicks the screen, and then you go, okay, great. Push it out.
Well, it's funny you say that, Ron, because I think going back 20 years ago when we were in the CTP program, actually maybe not quite 20, but 15 years ago, we were in the CTP program. I remember telling a lot of the people at Citrix that both the best and worst thing about Citrix branding the front door of their experience, whether it's for, storefront or the workspace app client, back in that day, it was called receiver, is that it becomes synonymous with the experience for an end user, whether it's good or bad. And let's be honest, 90% of the time when there is a problem with a VDI or SBC environment, it's probably something internal IT has done or an application update has done that creates an outage or a slow login or a inability to connect or whatever the case may be. And unfortunately, whoever owns that front door branding is going to get branded with it's a Citrix problem. Either Citrix is slow or Citrix doesn't work. Even though in 80-90% of times, it may be something that the engineering or ops team has done internally in an organization, but it doesn't matter because the brand is what the user sees and it becomes a Citrix problem. So that's an unfortunate reality.
In the 2000s, when my mother was still working at the hospital, I remember her calling me one day and going, hey, you work on that Citrix stuff, right? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, I can't get into it. What's my password? And I'm like, I don't know.
Oh my God.
But think about it. The brand. My mother, who knew nothing about anything, she couldn't log into her web interface and it said Citrix at the top.
Right.
So, Yeah, you're dead right on that. You're dead right. And for good or bad, you got a lot of we had a lot of brand recognition of Citrix from that, but it also meant that they got the blame for everything. But
So let me pivot back to the question you asked before
yeah.
we sidetracked on the security updates and how to mitigate some of that. So
Yeah.
you kind of asked me the question of why am I at Citrix? What am I excited about? And maybe like I'll share, obviously I've had 20 years experience working with Citrix before I joined VMware EUC and helped drive their strategy and their success. But I'll say like in the period of time I was at VMware, 2014 through 2023, VMware EUC grew a lot. In some cases at Citrix's expense because Citrix was going through some challenges at that time. There was some executive turnover, and I'm not just speaking about Mark Templeton. I mean, all throughout the executive
there was some
ranks,
churn. There were things going up and down. Yeah,
there were some product strategy issues. I mean, Citrix was chasing a lot of, I'll just call them science fair projects rather than incrementally improving things that customer wanted. There was some product stability issues and reliability issues. There was some bad M&A activity that was happening. I mean, I'm not going to poke fingers at any one acquisition, but just there were a number of acquisitions that didn't make a lot of sense for customers. Now, as you know, Citrix was taken over private equity by Vista and Elliott in 2022. And there's been a massive amount of changes within Citrix during that time. And not all of them good from a internal and external point of view. I mean, there's been a lot of layoffs, which is something that's very hard to talk about because a lot of good people lost their jobs and it's a very delicate subject. So I want to be careful in what I say about that. But I think the Citrix that exists today is very different from the Citrix that existed over the last 10 years. And what I mean by that is it's a lot leaner of an organization. It's more focused. It's hungrier on making sure they can serve their existing customers and serve them well. What I've observed, and this is not even since 2022, I would say probably since about 2020, 2021, when I was at VMware, I kind of observed a Citrix that kind of got their mojo back, so to speak. Like they were doing the right things in their product releases. They were focusing on quality. They were focusing on security. They were focusing on building features that customers were asking for instead of going off and trying to find the next shiny thing that they could impress a customer with during a keynote.
They moved off some tech that were, like you said, they were baby projects. They were the cute bunnies, but they weren't going anywhere. Yeah, and I think
they really focused on the core of what customers care about, which is feature development that customers need, both for stability and performance, and features that are what customers are asking for. They've kind of become a customer obsessed organization, which is really key. I think if you look at any software company, the key to growth and the key to customer retention is making sure you're delivering things that customers want. You're not focusing all your time on trying to be the next Apple and invent the next thing that customers need. You're focused on delivering the value that they need to keep using your product happily.
And I would add to that mix, and this I think about from you coming into Citrix. One of the times, sometimes what you have to do is what the customers are asking. You're dead right. Yeah, like login, that's all we've done for the last year and a half is say, how do we do the right thing by our customers? That's it. So it has to go support services. Everything has to be aligned. But I always use that old story. If you ask someone before the automobile what they needed a horse that
faster horse,
right?
Yeah,
faster. Sometimes you need those technology leaders that listen to what the customer says, but they go, ooh, their solution to it is fine. But if we did this, it's amazing, right? And they can't make that leap sometimes, but that's why you have CTOs and these, principal architects and guys who go out there and just, they have the mind to see what others can't see.
So I'll say that in some, I think you're absolutely right. And what I would say is, being customer obsessed and listening to your customers, you're absolutely right that sometimes customers just want incremental features to make the existing product better. And I would say that if you look at where your investments need to be for a private equity owned company, which we are, 80% of your investment really needs to be in making your core products better to keep your customers happy and keep them coming back, to keep using your software in the future.
Especially in today where everything is ACV and they can churn every year.
However, you do need to direct 10, 20% of your energy to the what's next. And I'd like to touch on that a little bit because I think, what Citrix has done in the last couple of years is they've really doubled down, tripled down on improving CVAD and DAS and making it a destination that customers want to use. But in addition, they've also been planning for the future. And the planning for the future, what I mean by that is, Citrix has always been known as a VDI and SBC company. It's, virtual desktops, it's terminal server, RDSH. That's the core of what Citrix is known by. But investments have been made in the last couple of years, and some of those investments have been accelerated substantially in the last 12 months around a lot of the what's next, like what are customers wanting to do beyond what CVAD and Citrix Cloud and DAS can provide. And there's a couple of products that have emerged out of that desire to figure out the what's next for customers. And those are part of the Citrix platform license. Like Citrix as a company has simplified all of our products and SKUs and that kind of stuff. We used to have hundreds of SKUs for customers and a crazy amount of sales operation.
The bigger you get, the crazier the sales ops and SKUs become.
Yeah. And by the way, that's not unique to Citrix. Like
no,
big
we saw it at
VMware,
vendor. We saw it at Citrix. It's at Microsoft. It's all over.
But Citrix has simplified that, and now there's basically two products you can buy. You can buy hybrid multi-cloud, which is both the combination of CVAD and DAS and NetScaler all in one, and you can use it on-prem, you can use it in the cloud, you can use Cloud Control Plane, you can use it any way you want. And customers can buy that and use that for their VDI, DAS, and SBC use cases. And then there's something called platform license that, of course, subsumes everything that's in hybrid multi-cloud, unlimited CVAD and DAS, not unlimited. I mean, you buy how many users you need. But on top of that, it also includes the NetScaler functionality. NetScaler used to be a separate product you would buy and license. And now NetScaler is available for basically unlimited use, that we can start to tell customers, hey, if you have another application delivery controller, I'm not going to name vendors, but why are you buying two different products if you own NetScaler entirely? Like, use it for all of your ADC needs. Don't just make it proxy ICA. Use it for your load balancing and your GSLB and your WAF and all those kind of things.
And NetScaler was always so much more than just dealing with remote protocols, right?
But
There's
the
so
problem
much
was
in
that
there,
Citrix used to sell it so strongly associated with CVAD and DAS that it just became the proxy ICA function. And that sells NetScaler very, very short on the richness of capabilities that it provides. So NetScaler is in the core product. It's part of hybrid multi-cloud and it's part of the platform license. But what platform license does is brings to bear a couple of additional products that I think are interesting for customers. So let me explain what platform is all about. So today, most customers think of Citrix as a VDI and SBC company. And if you're in financial services or healthcare where 80 to 100% of your estate is sitting behind VDI or SBC, then, hybrid multi-cloud is a good enough product for a lot of those customers, and it covers all their use cases and that kind of stuff. But increasingly, you come across organizations that only have 10 to 30% footprint that's VDI or SBC, and the other 60 to 80% footprint is physical PCs utilizing other technology for app delivery, security, all those types of things. And that's been a market that Citrix traditionally hasn't served well. Because those customers say, well, we don't need VDI, we don't need SBC for those users. So what value does Citrix bring? Now, what platform license does is two important things. One, it tells a customer, if you're going to be strategic with Citrix, then platform license makes more sense for you than hybrid multi-cloud does. Because hybrid multi-cloud is designed for the core traditional Citrix use cases of CVAD, DAS, and NetScaler. But it ignores the other 60, 80% of desktop footprint that Citrix wouldn't typically serve. Now, there may be cases where a customer can increase their footprint on VDI or SBC, but there's also customers that say VDI is too expensive. I want to shrink my population. So then is Citrix relevant to those customers? Time will tell. But what platform does is position us in a couple of important ways for the rest of the estate. So number one, that earlier this year we bought Uber Agent. Uber Agent is by far one of the best endpoint monitoring and analytics products on the market, not just for virtual desktops and apps, but for physical endpoint monitoring. Uber Agent is really great because it's one of the leanest, and by lean, I mean CPU, disk
very lightweight,
and
very
memory
lightweight
footprint, extremely lightweight, but it provides a ridiculous amount of detailed user performance analytics including some things that I think are extremely important that are often ignored in the DEX space, like how is my GPU being utilized by the processes on my machine? And am I getting the right performance out of the graphics stack? It gives you deep instrumentation into the browser. As more companies are using more web and SaaS applications, we often don't know enough about the performance of the browser session.
Yep.
Not only, like the problem with browsers is they often spawn multiple different processes and there's different tabs in each process.
We've all seen
most,
it.
Most monitoring tools, it's a complete black box. Like you don't have any visibility to page load times or what's causing the slowness with the browser. And Uber Agent instruments all of that. It can tell you at a tab level how much CPU and memory each tab is taking and why the web page view load is slow and what you can do to kind of improve that. So the monitoring capabilities in Uber Agent are just next level stellar. So we can position Uber Agent to the entire endpoint fleet in a customer, their physical PCs plus their virtual desktops and virtual apps, and cover 100% of the customer's estate. And when a customer buys platform, they get Uber Agent for every endpoint. It's not just for CVAD and DAS. It's
no, you can get it for everything. Yeah.
Then there's two other things that are
that move though is very it's easy to justify, especially what you were talking about. We run into it all the time.
Yeah.
You might have a 15,000 seat environment that's VDI you're selling into. One of the major retailers we just signed up, they've got like 58,000 physical devices.
Yeah.
No, I want to play in that space too. Yeah. Right? I mean, because we just launched our physical.
You guys released your physical monitoring.
Yeah, and with it is our script recorder. So all the stuff that we did in our knowledge worker and all that everybody uses, we made an automated tool so people can go into web pages, applications. Yeah. We're not using screen scraping or XY. We're using Windows controls and we're storing it all. But SaaS apps was one of their things. Was this retailer goes, a lot of our stuff that we're deploying to our users, they've got Office and stuff local, but it's SaaS apps. So we have to instrument that. So looking into the browsers, you got to do it. And Uber Agent's good at it. It is good at it.
And there are a bunch of web automation tools like Selenium and others like that you can use to kind of automate the browser interaction. But, the challenge with web and SaaS applications is, particularly for a lot of the modern SaaS apps, they change the framework and look and feel of the app so much that as you start building automated test kits with web automation frameworks, is like you don't know when your SaaS provider is going to drop a major refactoring of their code. And that just becomes a cat and mouse game of always trying to update your web automation frameworks to accommodate that. So that's a tough thing. Yep. But I want to really finish off that quick conversation about what's exciting about Citrix to me. So we talked about the Uber Agent thing, monitoring analytics to every endpoint, not just the CVAD or VDI or SBC. But there's two other pieces in platform that I think are super important for the long-term future of being strategic with Citrix. One is secure private access that lets you do zero trust network access for applications that run on the endpoint that have to communicate back to your data center or private cloud applications for web apps as well as client server apps with full-blown zero trust network access. So microsegment from the endpoint running application to the specific data center host or network or port in the data center. So you get that microsegment tunnel, but also being able to do real-time device posture on the endpoint and continuous enforcement of that zero trust network access tunnel is something that's in secure private access. And that's something that I think more and more customers are going to begin to rethink, is a layer 3 VPN the right approach? And then, so that's a key important point. And again, SPA, secure private access, can be used on every endpoint. You could use it inside of SBC and VDI as well for connecting back to on-premises resources from a cloud desktop as a service platform. So really great feature and functionality there. And then the third thing is Citrix Enterprise Browser. Most people don't know that Citrix has an enterprise browser that is a Chromium-based runs on the client, but gives you DLP, zero trust network access policies, security, all those kind of things. And I think most people think of enterprise browser and think that Citrix has remote browser isolation because that was what they first built. Yep. I say they, I'm them now, but it's still hard for me to think about that. So Citrix still has RBI, and you can use RBI for isolating browser URLs that you don't trust, and you want to make sure you sandbox the URL. So in case a malicious payload comes down, you're not running that on your endpoint, you're running it in the cloud in a disposable browser. But this is truly an enterprise browser that runs on the edge. So it's very similar to Island and Talon and Surf and Seraphic and all of those guys. But where I think Citrix differentiates is the ability to offer a platform approach to stuff. So if you want to do end-to-end zero trust in your environment, you want to put an enterprise browser out there and you want to be able to provide security and DLP and zero trust, it's great if you just have an enterprise browser. But if you want to apply zero trust across the board to be able to protect your enterprise browser apps, your client server and intranet web apps, and apps that you're serving up through SBC or VDI or DAS, Citrix is the only game in town that can do zero trust across all of those scenarios. And that's what gets me most excited. I think, from my time at VMware, zero trust was a top priority for me, even though I was not able to push zero trust as far as I wanted to go at VMware. That was like one of my number one priorities at VMware. And why I'm so excited about Citrix is they're already way ahead of what we were doing at VMware. Plus, we're investing even more for the future there. So I think it's a great opportunity from a growth point of view.
Well, and taking these technologies that Citrix is either already building or already have and are building upon, like an Uber agent and the zero trust and even the NetScaler side of the house, and applying that to the broader EUC face, right? Not just looking at this target. The real problem Citrix has is we go back to this branding, right? Everybody, you hear the word Citrix, the first thing they do is go, oh, our terminal server VDI team's over there. No, I wanted to talk to you, and getting into those right customers and having them see you as a different footprint.
I think Citrix has to exercise some go-to-market muscle to be able to position ourselves better with the network buyer, with the CISO and the security engineering team, the security operations team, and frankly, with the C-level execs, the CIO, the CTO, the CFO, the CEO.
You need to see you as more.
We've got our work cut out for us, but I feel very good about the platform capabilities and the messaging there. And I think like go-to-market we can solve that. The key thing is, do you have a product reality that appeals to a customer in all use cases? And I think we very much have that, and we're continuing to pour a lot more investment into those product lines so that when we have a conversation with the customer, we're not the VDI, SBC, DAS company. We are truly a provider that can help for all use cases across the entire estate of a customer's needs. And that's what gets me really excited about the Citrix of today.
I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to see it moving into that space. I think that, let's face it, even with cloud and everything else, there is still a limit to running a Windows operating system on a remote network somewhere that you're accessing. And with the power of our local devices now, distributed computing, it just makes a lot more sense, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm excited to see it. I want to watch what you do. Do you have any speaking events coming up before I know we only got like a minute.
I have a ton. So Citrix does these events now regionally called Citrix Connect. We've got a schedule published online. If you just Google Citrix Connect, you can find the link for that. I will be at the events in Dallas, Washington, D.C., San Jose, London, Sao Paulo, and Sydney that I can remember at the moment. There may be others, but basically I'll be at probably 80% of the connects that we're doing. I'll also be out at iGel Disrupt in Munich if folks are headed there and want to meet up. And of course, I'll be at some other industry events like E2EVC and others like that.
Awesome. Well, I know I've kept you over. It's how I normally do it. Keep you long. I will still comment on your background. I know it's not fake, but it looks fake. It's
it's real. I got my VMware cubes from my time there.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate you. I knew your schedule was going to be nuts, especially, being the new CTO there. I appreciate you carving out
Ron,
30 minutes.
For you, anytime. I make time for you anytime.
You're too nice of a guy.
You're a good friend.